everyone. I'm Dr. Kori Propst here with Dr. Joe Klemczewski. Welcome to the Diet Doc Life Mastery podcast. Previous podcasts, we discussed self-control. We want to break this down a little bit more for you today and kind of tease apart what that really means. Talk about willpower.
Right. So, Kori, I thought this was such a great topic, and I know it really is the cornerstone of progress. Matter of fact, there's a social psychologist that you are very fond of quoting, a guy in Florida who came out with a study and even a book that describes willpower as the greatest human strength because it is so predictive of long-term success. So I know this guy's work, and I think it even bleeds into or emanated out of the Stanford marshmallow study. So let's review just a little bit some of the concepts that you talked about yesterday, because I think they're brilliant, but they're just so misunderstood because we think of willpower as, hey, I just have to make a decision. It has to mean something to me, and let's go. And there are two components. You and I are kind of the yin and the yang of what I think the biggest aspect of self-control are. And I always come at just about everything as a naturalist first. Okay. So I look at the physiology, the biology, the genetics, and you're a cognitive behavioral therapist. So you really like to focus on what we can do to change and affect that. But it's not an either or thing, right? Like you've got to have both.
Definitely not, because as you're talking, I'm like, well, the biology filters into the emotion, and I don't do anything without considering that either. So
you don't think so because your brain is governed by your thoughts. But I'll give you just an example. Most people don't even know what determinism is, and I'm not going to get into this, but I'll give you one example. Something as simple as looking at whether somebody is monogamous or polygamous by just behavior, sexual behavior. We are identical to rats, and there have been studies that if you just change the location of the vasopressin gene promoter, you can take a rat that's polygamous, make him monogamous, or vice versa. And so it has nothing to do with emotion, has everything to do with just biology. So when you look at something like the Stanford marshmallow study, of course we can't break down every single child's environmental upbringing, but there's still something intrinsically that makes something very easy for people or very difficult. If I'm 6'8", it's going to be very easy for me to dunk a basketball. If I'm 5'8", it's not. Yeah. So no matter what environment I'm in, it's still going to come down to biology. Our brain is exactly like that. So I'm just saying, because I know you and I would argue about this, that we don't even understand all of the biology that can make this difficult, because there are some people that I think would naturally simply be better at self-control and discipline. Sure. Great for those people. Fantastic. But there are a lot of people who are not, and this is where we need to treat it like a muscle that we train. There are things we can do. So before I pitch it to you and ask you a question, I would just say, to summarize that biological component. Everybody knows that Stanford marshmallow study. They took kids, tons and tons of kids, multiple study groups, and they would put one marshmallow, sometimes a cookie or a pretzel in front of them and say, hey, Junior, I'm going to leave the room. I'll be back in a few minutes. If you want this treat, this marshmallow, you can have it. Right. But if you wait, when I come back, I'll give you 2. Yeah. And a certain percentage of kids just scarfed it right down. Just like, I don't care if I get an extra one. I'm going to eat this one right now. Yeah. I tend to think I would have been one of those kids who just ate it. I would have said, fuck it, I'm eating it. I don't care about the one 15 minutes later. I guarantee Kori Propst, somebody could have come back 100 years later and they would have found a pile of dust that used to be you, and that marshmallow would still be sitting on the table.
I am better than the freaking marshmallow. This will not me.
That's how strong-willed you are. And not everybody has those innate skills. And I know you would argue that you've developed those, and that's what we're going to talk about next. So I'm not going to take that away from you. But there is a genetic component. That's not what we're going to talk about. I think the most important thing there is just to understand that there could be a reason physiologically that you struggle with this. There's a physiological reason you may struggle with weight loss. There's a physiological reason you may struggle with a lot of things. Just having the ability to recognize that and say, okay, this is not easy for me, so I must go beyond. I must do something extra that other people might not have to, and I'm willing to take those steps. So these are the steps we're going to talk about today, if you don't mind, Kori.
Let's do it. Awesome. Okay.
Because the science or fiction element to this, the question is, can I create a roadmap, a plan to really master self-control in some areas of my life? And we're going to just, pick one. We're just going to say, okay, here's your goal, whatever it is, and here are the steps you need to take. Okay. So Dr. Kori Propst, health psychologist, in your mind, what are maybe the top 2, 3, 4 setup steps that you would give people in order to say, okay, this goal is very important to you. We have to build self-control. Here's how we're going to do it. Okay.
I would want to understand from this person in what areas of their life they have been able to persevere. I want to get to the heart of times when they've been successful doing that, because typically if someone is complaining about not having enough self-control, they have this very blanket general belief that it doesn't exist for them. And I tend to assume that we all have it's a strength of ours for all of us, just in smaller ways for many of us. So that would be the first thing, is I'd want to get a sense of this person's history and the things that they've accomplished. And I want them to tell me the story of how those accomplishments were achieved.
So you're first showing them that it is possible. You've got this skill, you've got this strength. We just have to look at how you've used it in the past.
Right. Yeah. Maybe it's in relationships. Maybe it's in as a parent. I'm not a parent, but I think of all the parents I know, and I can imagine what it would be like to be a parent. And I don't have a dog because I don't want to take responsibility for an animal.
I would definitely skip the kid part then.
And all of the potential frustrations that I would have to maneuver through. And that involves willpower.
Right. Can I stop you for a second?
Sure.
So another thing I learned from you in quoting studies like Dr. I think it's Meister from Florida, is you've quoted right from his study where you have said willpower is a depletable resource. So you only have so much bandwidth for hard mental work during a day. And so you're saying, look, I don't want to spend it even on a dog because I've got other priorities in my life.
Yes.
So this is what I really want to talk about today, is how much setup and work it takes. So if somebody just has a goal, we often say, hey, let's just, we'll put up that picture of the Corvette on the refrigerator and your goal is to make more money. And we need more specific, tangible steps to build that. If we were going to, as I used the analogy before, build strength, build a muscle, you don't just go in and throw 400 pounds on the bench press and get under that. There's a progression. So that's where I want you to focus a little bit, if you can, on how you would create a trajectory for your client to build that willpower.
Well, so the second thing I would probably do is assess where's their energy going. Because if willpower it's a renewable resource, but it's a depletable one, where's their energy going and how much bandwidth do they have? If you say that you want to do this, we have to recognize that there's going to be energy that's going out towards that. How is energy going to be coming back in? Or are you just going to be even more depleted than you are currently? Because now you're just adding something instead of taking something away. Yesterday we talked about how when you say no to something, you say yes to other things. Or when you say yes to one thing, it's probably going to be in your best interest to say no to others.
Perfect.
Right? So that would be the second thing I would do. Assess your level of bandwidth.
Mm-hmm. So, Kori, one of the things that I came up with is just continuing this metaphor in my mind of training your willpower like you would train a muscle.
Okay.
Again, this is not something that I'm really good at. Willpower to me and discipline, because I'm very scattered. I'm very ADHD-ish. I'm high anxiety. So this is something that I've really had to work at. Okay. And it takes me planning it just like I would plan a progression of training. So I consider first that I need to warm up. I need to warm up on the bike. I need to stretch out a little bit. I got to get ready. And for me, a lot of times that's as simple as writing this on paper. I need to see it. What are my actual goals? Break it down in terms of what it's going to take me. Like you said, some things are going to have to fall off the table. I'm going to have to be okay carving time into my schedule. If I need more sleep, I'm going to have to get that. If I need more information, I'm going to have to do that. If it's something I have to practice or spend time doing, things like meal prep or whatever, if my goal is weight loss, I have to factor that in tangibly or it's just never going to happen.
Yeah.
Is that an actual process that you go through with people?
Yeah, absolutely. And while you're talking, what I'm thinking about, Joe, is how I will increase the frequency of a behavior as opposed to the intensity or the duration. So say that I have a client who needs to meal prep, right? Well, let's plan for 5 minutes of meal prep every day, most days of the week, rather than I'm going to do 5 hours on Sunday. That typically doesn't work very well. And so 5 minutes most days is going to help that client more effectively build up momentum and a sense of confidence and competence that she can actually do it. But coming back to your analogy about exercise, I'm not going to ask a client who hasn't exercised at all to go hop on the treadmill for an hour. No, go do 5 minutes. So frequency as opposed to intensity and duration to begin with. No matter really, I feel like what the activity is that they want to begin incorporating into their lives or practicing. When I was learning meditation, it was the same thing. No, the goal was not to do half an hour every single day. It was 5 minutes most days of the week. And though I'll say this, research shows that when you can string together if you can do it every day, even for a small amount of time, you're going to have a lot more success than if you're like, well, I'll do it every other, or I'll do it every 3 days. So.
Yeah, and that's 100% the perfect combination of the behavioral and the natural, because I believe, of course, there are those habits, things that we just get in our system, our daily rituals, but also we know that we're creating those deeper synaptic grooves. We're channeling in those neurons to fire in the right patterns. And so that's why I think, and I'll close with this, Kori.
I do have one more thing I want to say before you close, though, Joe. Okay. Don't forget. Okay, go for it.
Well, what I was going to say is leave room for growth. You need to expect unexpected things to happen. And I think of it like this. We mentioned this yesterday, Kori. As you learn new things, develop new skills, you're going to have more neurons, more neuronal tissue that can actually now interact with those types of bits of information. And so you don't realize often that the more you know, the easier it is to know more. You assimilate information better and faster. So the way I'm approaching a goal today may be completely different than I'm going to look at it in 6 months. So
Yes.
I think the most important takeaway we can have, and this is my call to action for you guys, is to revisit your goals. Write these things out like a flow chart. Like Kori said, write down what you have to do, what you have to take away, what your plan of action is going to be. And then don't just use it as boxes to check off. Revisit this every week, every month. How am I doing? Let me rewrite it. I learned this. Let me put this in there. Here's where this has now taken me. I'm going to adjust over here. If you keep revisiting that, you're going to be gradually advancing not only towards your goal, in your ability to achieve goals just in general. You're actually exercising your ability to have better willpower, but you can't just make a goal, take off, and it's over. You've got to visit it over and over and over and treat it as if you really are training for strength.
Yeah, not necessarily looking at it as just one and done, like I met the goal, but what am I learning as I approach the goal? How am I becoming a different person as I go through this process? What are the skills that I can take into other areas of my life? Absolutely. We mentioned the client yesterday who, she was successful in not drinking at this party and came away just feeling a lot more confident about her ability to say no. And, it got me thinking, Joe, about how a lot of times what's going to make taking an action repeatedly easier is, like you said, constantly kind of reflecting on what we're doing and how we're doing it, but pairing the behavior with something that we already do naturally and pretty much automatically. We attach it. So it doesn't require as much energy to say, like, to stop, to pause, to then be like, should I, shouldn't I, can I, do I want to, asking all the questions that have the potential to pull us away from the behavior that we've said is important. But this thing's already happening. I've paired it now. They go together. Okay. We have to remove a lot of the decisions to be made in order to have a greater level of willpower. So when we're talking too about, making changes in our lives, and I'm just thinking about losing weight or eating healthier, there is so much to be said about engineering our environments. Take away the things that are going to cause you to be impulsive. You say I have like willpower up the wazoo, right? So it's holiday time, and when my dad came, they brought these cookies called Bizcochitos from New Mexico. No, they're not like the salty, crunchy, cheesy chips, Cheetos. They're like these little Mexican wedding cookies, and they're quite yummy, and they melt in your mouth, and they've been on top of our refrigerator. The only time I ever think about the Bizcochitos is when I walk into the kitchen and I see them. What would be the best way for me to engineer my environment in order for this to happen? Put them away. Put them where I'm not going to see them. There's no decision to be made then. So, okay, tangent. Sorry, Joe.
No, I mean, that's actually one of my key points in, what I wanted to talk about was, we discussed taking away things because willpower is a depletable resource. So we've got to make sure, that's why I mentioned like sleep and stress and things like chaos. We have to make sure this is a good time in our life to even be addressing this. But here's what I want you guys to do. Like I said, get out a chart, make a spreadsheet, get on ClickArt in Word, create a great spreadsheet or flow sheet, and plan out everything that you know to be the best trajectory for your goal, and then rewrite it, visit that thing weekly, monthly, and like I said, make room for this to be a constant form of progression, because we know, going back to biology, it takes at least 6 to 9 months, most of the time about 12 months, for synaptic rewiring to occur, for that neural plasticity, so that, as Kori is alluding to, things become just reflexive. That willpower becomes more automatic because you're so much stronger. If you can only do 5 push-ups today, if you practice push-ups for a year, you could just reflexively hit the ground and maybe do 50. And you don't have to think about it anymore. So that's the power of treating your willpower like the predictive and renewable and depletable resource that it is. So hope this helps, guys. Kori had such a great concept yesterday just for bringing up this topic. I wanted to try and put some legs under it for those of us who struggle with it maybe a little bit more than superpowers like Kori. But thank you, Kori, again. You are the expert at this, so I always love chatting with you about this. And thank you guys for sticking with us beyond 100 episodes. We're working on even some improvements. We want to do some feature-length stuff coming up. So we look forward to the next 100 with you. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.